And welcome back to Pissed Off Politically Speaking, right here on the 405 Radio. You can follow me on Twitter at Pops Radio or the network at the 405 Radio. Never a dull moment. It's a good day today on the Pops Radio Show when you can have one of your other heroes from the national news media on. He is a straight shooter, and I've always said I could count the reputable and the cream of the crop of the national media on one hand, at least those that I trust and probably have a couple of fingers left over. He is a host of The Lead on CNN, and in the last couple of months took over as anchor of State of the Union, CNN's big Sunday show. He is someone I consider a friend because he always answers the call when I ask. Jake Tapper, thank you for being on.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you being. And I sincerely mean it. You're a straight shooter, and that's what I love to bring to my listeners. And speaking of, everybody's clamoring about the big first GOP debate last Thursday. I know you've been covering it on your programs. There's been a lot, and you're active on Twitter, kind of like I am, and there has just been a broiling Twitter thing going on with this Megyn Kelly and Trump thing, and the Trump people are very defensive. They're almost like what I used to call the Palenistas. They're very fervent. They're aggressive, sometimes rude in defense of Donald Trump. But has he hurt himself with this thing, or is this another deal they're going to chalk up that it did nothing but help his numbers?
It's so tough to assess when Donald Trump hurts himself, because his whole shtick, his whole pitch is anti-Republican establishment, anti-Washington, anti-political correctness. And so, he comes out of the gate with his comments about Mexico and illegal immigrants, very controversial. Some people thought they were racist, and he goes up in the polls. He attacks John McCain's war heroism, and he goes up in the polls. Now, both times, pundits, Republican officials thought that he would have hurt himself, but neither time did he. And it should be observed that, illegal immigrants and John McCain are not really popular with the Republican base. Now you have him in a fight with Fox News, and more specifically with Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly. And I would think that might be a bridge too far, just because Megyn Kelly and Fox News are popular with the Republican base, popular with conservatives. But he defies predictability, Mr. Trump. And as you note, he has a lot of fervent fans who I think in some ways look at Fox News as the Republican establishment in a way, trying to chase out this truth teller, trying to chase out this guy who is not beholden to special interests, is not beholden to the leaders of the Republican Senate and the Republican House. And it will be interesting to see. If I had to bet, I'm not generally a betting man, but if I had to bet, I would bet that he not only doesn't hurt himself short term in the polling numbers, but he maybe even helps himself, because he's still out there being himself. And as you know, people in the Republican Party are fed up, and they're not only fed up with Obama and the Democrats, they're also fed up with the Republicans in Washington.
Well, my observation is, Jake, that part of his fervent support probably is a portion rank and file Republican or traditional GOP voters, but I'm not so sure he hadn't tapped into an element of a more conservative-leaning constituency that has just stayed home or bitched about things but never really shown up at the polls. I'm not so sure, based on what I've seen, especially the fervent ones, that they're traditional GOP voters just because of the way they talk and the way they attack fellow conservatives. So it may be he's broadened the base to some extent.
Well, it's
and
interesting. I've looked at, and there have been, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but there have been analyses of who are the Trump voters, who are the Trump supporters, and they're from all over the map. It's not just conservatives. It's not just, it's all, he grabs from all sorts of groups. So you might have something there that I think that they are a disparate group.
Well, and I think the question is do they ultimately show up to vote? My bet is if Trump is the nominee, they probably don't. But I like you, Jake, well, I say like you've observed that a number of us have been wrong at certain waypoints for Donald Trump, and I think I'm in good company that felt like he wouldn't file the paperwork or he wouldn't file the financials, and now here he is, on the GOP stage at the first major debate, which I think is pretty ballsy, standing there and saying you wouldn't rule out a third-party run against any one of your components or opponents sitting there on the stage. That was a little bit of drama. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Trump, but I do think he insinuated something he shouldn't have about Megyn Kelly. There's a big debate as to whether or not he meant what he said. I heard it. I took it that way, and I'm not a degenerate for taking it that way. I think I knew exactly what he meant. Okay, he said anybody who would take it.
Eric Erickson is the one who really first made it a major issue, because Eric Erickson was having his red state gathering over the weekend, and Eric Erickson, after Donald Trump, for your listeners who aren't familiar, although probably all of them are, on Friday night he went on CNN and he said of Megyn Kelly, he was talking about, I guess he was talking about just her being very aggressive, and he said that she had blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever, and a lot of people took that to mean that he was insinuating that she was, it was that time of the month for her. Yeah. So now he denies it fervently. He told me yesterday he was saying, blood coming out of her nose or ears, wherever. But he wasn't insinuating what other people took it to mean, and the fact that people took it that way says more about them than it does about him. But Eric Erickson, staunch conservative who has made many, anti-politically correct comments himself, is the one who took offense and disinvited Donald Trump, and he's the one that made this into, I think, a big deal. And obviously a lot of other candidates, Carly Fiorina, Jeb Bush, others reacted. And it's fascinating. One of the things that's so fascinating is it's my understanding is that Fox News has barely mentioned this controversy.
They haven't.
Which I don't understand. Just as a matter of news, I can understand it being something that's uncomfortable, just because Megyn Kelly's one of their stars, and obviously that kind of discussion is I could say uncomfortable. But at this point, you have Jeb Bush, Carly Fiorina, everybody's talking about it. Donald Trump spent much of Sunday morning explaining what he meant, what he didn't mean. This is news, so I don't really understand how you avoid covering it.
Yeah, well, Howie Kurtz covered it a little bit on his little show, but you're right. In terms of news coverage, hard news coverage, there hasn't been a lot. I'm not a big Eric Erickson fan. I never have been. I mean, you point out he's made some Neanderthal comments on his own. Those are my words, not Jake's. But, right. I didn't need Eric Erickson to point out to me the insinuation there, because I watched it live, and he didn't say, he said somewhere, and he paused when he said somewhere and then followed it up with, but I don't want to get into the muck for, accentuation. So it wasn't a quantum leap to make that conclusion. I think this is going to be another bump in the road for, I think half of Twitter is really pissed off at Megyn Kelly and Fox for the aggressive questioning, and the other half is kind of non-committal, if you will, but they've taken some heat for it. I want to talk about some of the other ones before we have to let you go.
Yeah.
Jake, I was going to run down the list and give my one-word or two-word observations and see what your take is. I thought Rubio connected. If I were to have to pick one of the traditional candidates, I think he probably rose to the top in the debate.
I think he's the one. Well, I mean, I thought he did well. Look, it's tough for anybody to break through when you have 10 people on the stage, and that's going to be a problem that I have when I moderate the debate with Hugh Hewitt next month. 10 candidates is a lot of candidates. But that said, I thought Rubio had a good night. There are a lot of Democrats who think that he would be the toughest one for Hillary Clinton to beat, and they are happy that he has not really yet popped, that he has not really had. He's not, he's up there in the top 10, but he's not in like the top 3 or 4. And there are a lot of Democrats very happy about that. But it's still very, very early, obviously.
I thought Ben Carson scored with his humor, but You know, Ben Carson and Ted Cruz, I put as they were on form but unremarkable.
I think Ben Carson had he had a good night. For a lot of people like Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina, it's really more about like just people even seeing them and getting to know them and think about them in that way. Because Ben Carson has been he's a neurosurgeon. He's a brilliant man, obviously, but as a political commentator and a political entity, it's still relatively new. So I think he's got some work to do in terms of people thinking, well, can I really imagine this person as president? You could see that was where the Fox News team was going at him, just in terms of their first question to him was about all the things he did not seem to have known. And that's really going to be the first hurdle for him, I think, when it comes to voters. But people do like him a lot.
Yeah. I thought Kasich and Cruz were kind of textbook. Nothing to write home about, but solid performances for what they were.
Yeah, I mean, Ted Cruz is Ted Cruz, and if you like that, he rejected the term firebrand when I used it the other day in an interview with him. But if you like that kind of charismatic, very consistent, constitutional, conservative, then I'm sure he scratches your itch because he's very strong that way. He's definitely one of the smartest people on the stage. Kasich, it's interesting. He's kind of carving out this path as a moderate. Or at least a moderate to conservative on the stage. He really is very conservative. Now, he hasn't necessarily governed that way in Ohio, which is a state, obviously, with a lot of Democrats as well.
Right.
But it's just interesting seeing him because, when he was in Washington, he was a real conservative, very strong fiscal conservative. And now I think he's kind of casting himself as the Jeb Bush character if Jeb Bush falls apart.
Right.
He'll be there to be the establishment person who can maybe win in November, the more moderate to conservative person. And I thought, he got a lot of applause. Then again, it was a hometown crowd.
Do we have time for a couple of final thoughts?
Sure.
I was.
You just want me to give some? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I was very impressed with Huckabee's Pimps and Prostitutes plan.
Solve for the
typical
fiscal crisis,
Huckabee.
solve the Social Security. Yeah.
And Walker,
well, I mean, look, the consumption tax, the idea of a sales tax, or what I think he calls it the fair tax,
right.
Is one that's been kicking around for a while. The idea that you're not taxed on your income, but you're taxed on what you spend. It's interesting. It's certainly, he's always very colorful. He always finds a way to break through, whether it's his, whether it's contrasting Ronald Reagan, trust but verify, trust but vilify with Obama, or his pimps and prostitutes line. He's the one that you can tell of all of them. He's the one with the most experience communicating. He's the one with the most experience as a broadcaster. The years he had on radio and the years he had on Fox News with his own show, you can really tell because he's concise, articulate. He comes up with a punchy zinger here and there. That's just one of his strengths.
Yeah. Well, and then Walker, I guess, last but not least, I was expecting a little bit more of a breakout for him, but he just, in my mind, gave a yeoman, I guess I say textbook is not a negative, just a solid performance, but again, unremarkable in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I call it a Hippocratic performance, do no harm. I thought he was fine. I thought he was strong and eloquent. He came with his, the points he wanted to get out. He said them. He made them. I think he didn't disappoint any of his fans. He didn't really have any breakout moments. But again, with 10 people and one of them being Donald Trump, it's tough. It's tough to break out. The moderators also consumed a lot of time.
Yeah, they did. They did.
And I mean, I think I saw an analysis that said of the 2 hours, moderators were talking for about a quarter of it. And,
wow.
That's going to be a challenge for me as well, for me and Hugh Hewitt when we do it in September. You want to ask questions, you want to follow up at the same time, you don't want to talk too much. So, I don't fault Scott Walker. I think his performance, he had a fine performance. It's going to, it will be better one of the reasons I think Carly Fiorina was able to shine in the undercard debate is because there were only 7 people on that stage, in addition to the fact that I think she had a good night. But there were 7 people on the stage as opposed to 10. That's a lot more time that you get to speak. I think when people start dropping out of the race, we'll have more debates where people are able to say, oh, Marco Rubio, he totally won that debate, or Scott Walker, he totally won that debate. Fill in the blank of whatever candidate you like the best. But I think when there are 5 candidates on stage, or 4 as opposed to 10.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I've already put out there, I'm not so sure that Carly Fiorina didn't win both debates. So, but that's just my 2 cents. She had tape played in the big debate, and in terms of looking presidential and at least pushing my buttons from a performance standpoint, she's got a lot to gain, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
Yeah, well, we had her on the show yesterday. I thought she did well. I would not be surprised at all if she is on the main debate stage in September.
Oh, God, you anticipated my last question, and that is, I think the 10 will be different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the 10 will be different. I think Carly will be. I think it's. If I had to put money on it, again, I'm not usually a betting man, but I feel I'm in a gambling mood today. I would put money that Carly is on the stage, and that of course would mean that one of the other guys is not. I don't know who that's going to be.
Yeah.
But I think Carly Fiorina will be on the stage in September.
Well, I know I'm pushing my luck taking your time. This is the first time I haven't gotten an email from your folks at CNN saying that I needed to wrap. So I'm going to consider myself lucky today. But Jake, you were a true sport and a true gentleman. You've always answered the call when I wanted to bring my listeners your perspective, and I think I have an obligation to bring non-Fox perspectives to these airwaves, and I really appreciate it. You're
Thank you, sir.
Listen, we'll be watching.
Nice. I appreciate it.
We'll be watching your show this afternoon. Good luck, and thanks for being on, bud.
Sounds great.
There you go, folks. Mr. Jake Tapper, anchor, CNN The Lead, and State of the Union. Now you see why I enjoy him so much. He is not a partisan. He is not carrying anybody's water, and brings a real objective point of view to it. I guess I was on my best behavior today because he didn't call me out on anything I had to say, although he might have on my declaration that Carly Fiorina had won both debates. And you know what? I stand by that. I just think that in terms of both technically, if you were scoring the debate, and on substance, I just felt like she looked real presidential in how she conducted herself. And